You're listening to the Hamptons to Hollywood podcast, made possible by our friends at Hamptons Ham Poured. Summer is almost here, and there's no place we'd rather be than the Hamptons. Everything from the relaxed vibe to the sweet coastal air just exudes relaxation and fun. If a Hamptons trip isn't in the cards for you this summer, don't worry, we've got you covered. Not only can you see what's happening in the Hamptons on hamptonstohollywood.com, but you can also bring that sweet coastal sea air right to your own living room with a candle from Hamptons Ham Poured. Made locally in East Hampton, there's a scent for each of your favorite villages. The amazing smells will make you feel like you're summering in the Hamptons, even if you happen to be in Hollywood, Houston, or somewhere in between. And for all Hamptons to Hollywood podcast listeners, we're giving you $5 off every candle found at hamptonstohollywood.com. Go to hamptonstohollywood.com/shop, pick your favorite scent, and use discount code CANDLE5 at checkout. hamptonstohollywood.com/shop, pick your favorite candle, and use code CANDLE5 to get $5 off. Hey guys, it's me again, Kyle Langan, founder of hamptonstohollywood.com. The Hamptons to Hollywood podcast is all about bringing to light the people, places, and casually luxurious culture of the Hamptons and Los Angeles. On today's podcast, I'm talking to Ron Goerler, who runs the Jamesport Vineyard, which is an amazing winery on the North Fork of Long Island. Ron is incredibly knowledgeable about all things wine, is passionate about sustainability, and has that distinct Long Island charm that's impossible to resist. I learned a ton about winemaking on Long Island, and I think you'll love our conversation today. You can check out my entire adventure at Jamesport Vineyards in our latest blog post. But for now, here's Ron. Yeah, so Ron, thanks for sitting down with me. You were just saying, this started in 1986, right, James?
We purchased the property. My father and mother purchased the property in 1986, but we actually came out prior to that. My father was always coming out to the North Fork as a kid as well as an adult, and we would stay over in Cutchogue in Nassau Point.
Okay.
And then in 1981 or 80, the winter of 80, my parents came out here, and they actually drove past the place that they had always driven past on their way to Nassau Point. My grandmother had passed away, and they decided that they wanted to make a change and move out here.
Yeah.
So they sold the house in Nassau Point, and they literally knocked on the door where we currently are on Cox Lane, and said, "Would you like to sell the farm?" The gentleman said yes.
Wow.
And in 1981, that winter, January, they signed the contract.
Wow.
At the time, it was a 60-acre farm. It had apples and peaches on it. My dad always wanted to own a farm. My dad is not a farmer.
Right.
He's in the plumbing manufacturing business.
Oh, okay.
And so that's been in the business for about 125 years.
Wow.
My grandfather started that business.
Wow.
So my dad is an entrepreneur, always got himself into things. The wine industry has just started to blossom out here. It obviously started with the Hargraves back in 73, and he wanted to be a part of it. So we came out here, we were number 5. The early ones get to number themselves because they were, the pioneers. And so that when you're a pioneer, meaning you don't know what you're doing, you're trying to figure it out, because there really was only 4 or 5 of us at the time, and then we all were learning from each other. Made homemade wine, but this was the next step, was buying land to plant grapes to eventually make wine. And so that's how we came here in Jamesport. This place was the North Fork Winery. It had not done well, and so was put into bankruptcy.
Okay.
We bought the place in an auction, and it was a little spirited auction because there were a lot of people wanting to have this location because it was one of the first stops on the North Fork. Most of the vineyards were located in Cutchogue at the time, with Lenz and Pindar and Bedell.
Right.
And my father felt that he wanted to be this way. He did not want to be at the farm with the winery. He wanted to be separated from that. And so, the neat thing about that, my dad's vision on that, is that today there's about 10 wineries right here in Jamesport and Aquabog, and it's kind of a little destination in its own. It's how it's translated. But we did not know how to make wine. And I grew up drinking wine with my father and mother, but we were not winemakers. We weren't generations of, vineyard owners and stuff. And so we planted grapes. We'd come out on the weekends, lived in Oyster Bay. We'd come out and we'd work on Saturday and Sunday and go home Monday. That was the routine for many, many years, and until we decided that we wanted to jump in fully into the wine business. And like most wineries, they struggled in the beginning because of there was not the tourism base, there was not the consumer base that was demanding Long Island wines.
Right. So how did you figure out how to make the wine?
A lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
You have to emulate or, say, okay, I love Napa or I love Bordeaux or, whatever region you think you want to emulate, and then you have to figure out the varieties that you want to plant. So like most of us, we planted Chardonnay and we planted Cab Sauv, right? Mm-hmm. So those were the hot topics back in the early 80s. Everybody was, doing Cab Sauv and Chardonnay around the world. And so I think the challenge was finding out what else could we make here. We're a brand new industry. What grows well here? There's 5,000 varieties around the world. What grows well on the North Fork of Long Island? It is a maritime climate, so it is a little bit difficult in the sense that you have to figure out what grapes are going to grow in a high humidity environment and around salt water. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of regions in the world that do that. Bordeaux is one of them, and so I think that's always the challenge: is what variety is going to do best.
Yeah.
Looking back, Cab Sauv was probably not the first choice for us. It was Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
We felt that Sauvignon Blanc was just a natural because of the maritime climate, good acidity. It was not Chardonnay, anything but Chardonnay. That happened in the 90s.
Right.
And today there's more Sauvignon Blanc being planted on a continual basis because it is really a great food style wine.
Yeah, it goes with a lot of stuff. Yeah. What are you guys known for here?
Sauvignon Blanc, we went in with that originally. That was one of the original plantings. We did plant, other varieties, Merlot and Pinot Noir and Riesling. And so I think it's always hard to pinpoint the trend, but you try to hit that a little bit on the high note rather. Sauvignon Blanc is always the least planted in the United States. A lot of people have a hard time identifying with it because they don't know what it is, right?
Huh.
And they know Chardonnay.
Yeah.
No Cab Sauv.
Right.
And but now because of New Zealand, Sauvignon Blanc is mainstream.
Yeah.
It's it was never that way. It's still the least planted grape in California, believe it or not.
Oh.
Chardonnay and Cab are the king, and then Merlot and Pinot Noir, and then Sauvignon Blanc under that.
You guys have a really good Riesling here. The one that's not sweet.
Yep.
You get scared when you hear Riesling if you don't like sweet wine.
Well, you think of Blue Nun. I grew up with Blue Nun, sweet, and that's the way the Germans make it. They made it sweet, and dry Rieslings are obviously the Finger Lakes do a great job with Riesling, but we planted Riesling pretty early on. We felt once again it was a hardy grape. Traveling to these different locations, you found that. They do make, the gamut from dry all the way up to the Trockenbaron Auslesen style, which was what we make also, which is the, very late harvest style wines. And so I think that's always the trick with some of this stuff is finding varieties, but we're always experimenting with new varieties. We have Muscat Ottonelle going in this year. We have Lagrein, which is a northern Italian red variety, and we're putting in Gewürztraminer. Gewürztraminer is one of those grapes that if you don't know it and you can't pronounce it, you're not going to go near it. And that's the hard part about putting some of these varieties in is, we've got Albarino in the ground, which we planted about 5 years ago, and that's, Albarino is one of those varieties that's, because of Spain is, starting to explode out of there. And people look for different alternatives. I think the generations look for different things. The baby boomers are comfortable with what they know, and Generation X is comfortable with everything they don't know.
Right.
So
that's true.
That's the marketing that you have to figure out about people. Yeah,
for sure. You were just saying earlier that you kind of need to find different vineyards or styles that you want to emulate.
Yeah.
What's been the most influential for Jamesport?
The North Fork has come of age. It's been here for 40 plus years now. And, when I say emulate, not having an identity in the early beginning, not, understanding the wine styles that come from here, you tend to say, okay, if the market's making oaked Chardonnay, that's what we should do here. If the market wants big, jammy, fruity wines, that's what we should do. But eventually the terroir or the land that we're surrounded by here dictates what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
And so that's the cool climate aspect that we have here. We are in the cool climate zone. We don't have 80, 90 degree days. We're not California.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get away from that eventually and say, I can't do that.
Yeah.
Don't want to do that. Because when you have delicate style wines that we have with good acidity, medium tannins to them, if you put a lot of oak on them, tend to fall apart, and that's what we learned. The higher the pHs were and in the wines, they didn't really do well in terms of aging.
Yeah.
So a lot of the early stuff that we have found out that was picked earlier and was didn't have a lot of oak, they're really holding up, meaning, we always hold wines back to taste and evaluate, where they are 20, 30 years from now. And like most regions, that's what it takes time for that to happen.
Yeah.
We're at that point now where we're 40 years into this, and the earliest bottling I do have is a 1982 Sauvignon Blanc, believe it or not. Oh. And it's I look at it and there's only 6 bottles in the cellar, and I say, okay, so when is this wine? How long can it go? And and has it passed its peak? You don't know until you pop the cork. Yeah. So to answer your question, I always look at Bordeaux or the Loire Valley in France in terms of parallels, looking across the geological things, longitude, latitude.
Where are we?
Where are we? And unfortunately, globalization is changing all of that because it's getting hotter in certain areas and cooler in other areas.
Right.
But Bordeaux has always been similar to what we are because of the river, because of the Atlantic Ocean influence that it has. Loire is the same thing, and so I still think those style of wines for me are really the wines that are similar in characteristics.
And so, how many acres are in or cumulative? It's what
60 total acres. Here in Jamesport is 4, where the winery we would do the processing, we have the tasting room set up. And then in Matitup, we have another 10 acres, which is about 5 miles from here. And then Cutchogue, where the main farm is, there's a total of 60 acres there, but about 40 is planted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then why did you want to, I guess seeing your dad, that must have been, start this kind of business must have been really exciting for you, right? What made you kind of want to pursue it?
I think when you're a pioneer, you want to be on the ground level. There's an old saying: if you're a pioneer, you're going to pay twice, and that's because you're going to make the mistakes along the way, and so we made a lot of mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes what not to do, obviously, because in the winemaking there's a sharp curve, and if you go off the curve too quickly, you tend to be out of the business pretty quickly. In terms of financials that go into it. I've always been attached to the earth. I went to school for ag sciences, and so that's always been my driving force, is the vineyard side of it, because the vineyard is what makes the wine. A lot of people might think differently, but you have a great winemaker, you have a great winery, all these wonderful things, but it comes down to the grapes.
Right.
And so that gets back to the choice of grapes, the varieties that you pick, and what do you want to be, and what do you want to see in the future. And I think that's always the challenge to this business, is that you have to be satisfied at some point with what you're doing, but yet never fully satisfied, because what is the next?
You can't look ahead.
Yeah, you have to be looking ahead. We always look 2 years ahead in terms of production, in terms of what is from a barrel ordering standpoint, from inventory standpoint. You're always a little bit 2 years ahead.
Don't worry, we'll be right back. Summer is almost here, and there's no place we'd rather be than the Hamptons. Everything from the relaxed vibe to the sweet coastal air just exudes relaxation and fun. If a Hamptons trip isn't in the cards for you this summer, don't worry, we've got you covered. Not only can you see what's happening in the Hamptons on hamptonstohollywood.com, but you can also bring that sweet coastal sea air right to your own living room with a candle from Hamptons hand poured. Made locally in East Hampton, there's a scent for each of your favorite villages. The amazing smells will make you feel like you're summering in the Hamptons, even if you happen to be in Hollywood, Houston, or somewhere in between. And for all Hamptons to Hollywood podcast listeners, we're giving you $5 off every candle found at hamptonstohollywood.com. Go to hamptonstohollywood.com/shop, pick your favorite scent, and use discount code CANDLE5 at checkout. hamptonstohollywood.com/shop, pick your favorite candle, and use code CANDLE5 to get $5 off. Yeah. And you're keeping it, are your kids?
I have 4 children. They're all have been engaged at some level. 2 of them are out of the house. They have careers, and they come back and help from time to time, which you want them to follow their path. Mm-hmm. I have one daughter with me now. who's Sarah, who's working in the hospitality side of things, and that's the path that she's looking to do. She's taking business management, finishing up this year in college.
Wow.
And then I have a 15-year-old who is starting at the the new level of what we're doing here with the food service and the kitchen aspect of it, and she's working on that side when it comes to serving people and things of that nature. So you have to get in the ground level to understand the business, and that's always what I tell my children. I got into the bottom with my father, meaning we knew nothing,
right? And
so we learned as the business grew what how we wanted it to perceive itself, and then now we're taking this in another direction with the house and the hospitality and now the kitchen going, and it adds a different dimension of the business.
Yeah. So just talking about that, I mean, it's a pretty business savvy move to say, okay, well, we're not going to just do manufacture wines, but now we're going to do a restaurant. And what was that process for? How long was it?
Well, when you travel around the world, you see that there's different business models, and the thing that always fascinated me is that food and wine always are a combination, and in order to appreciate wine, I think you have to have really good food, and in order to have really good food, I think you need good wine.
Right.
They go hand in hand, kind of. And this region was a meat and potatoes region, and I say that potatoes were the big part of the driving force out here for many years, over 50,000 acres out here. In the 80s, that industry crashed, and then the vineyards started to move in, and so the culture was not there. And when I say culture, is that the restaurants hadn't caught up to the wines, and the wines hadn't caught up to the culture. I just was over in Italy over the winter, and there's a culture there around the region. I was in Barolo and Barbaresco, and it's the food, it's the wine, it's the people, it's all of that meshing together. 40 years young, it's hard for that old generation to transition to this generation that's here now, and so the full circle for us is that we made wine, people came and tasted it, it was that was accepted, right? Mm-hmm. And then you see that people want a little more, and then the entertainment moved in where there was music, and then we did a little bit more with pairings of food at the winery, and then the next step was for taking the house and having a place for people to stay while they're on the property, and then the next step was to have the food and the people and the wines marriage together, and that takes time to do that, because it's changing the mentality of the area that we're in, to understanding that there is a different culture out there. Right.
There is a culture, and I mean, you've made this a destination, now with this amazing, what would you call this?
Well, we call it a BNC, Bed and Coffee. So, once the kitchen is developed, we will be able to obviously get it to that B&B level, and where we're able to give people food. And that's the ultimate goal with the kitchen, is to really marriage the food that's from this area and use the local farmers and things. And we're going to have a wood-fired oven, so that when people are on the premise, we can have that aspect of it. We don't, we're not going to have a standard kitchen here. It's going to be strictly a wood-fired oven setup.
Cool.
And so we're going to be cooking with the fire, and that's going to be the fun part of it. And the oven gets up to a very high temperature, and you can do lots of things with those high temperatures if you understand it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the culture that we talk about with what we've created here on this piece of property. And we've been fortunate that the towns have allowed us to take it to this level. And I think that's always the hard part about change, is that towns don't want a lot of change if it's going to impact the community
or
sometimes.
Disrupt.
And the wine business has brought economic boom to the North Fork, and it has brought prosperity here in terms of land values for people, and it's really saved the North Fork, because what's the alternative? Development.
Right.
And that can happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's not many. I've traveled a lot of places. There's not many places where you're so connected to the water, the Atlantic, the bay, the Sound. The city's 2 hours away, so there's a lot of stuff happening there.
Yeah.
And people are wanting to be a part of a growing region, and that's the fun part. We're young. We're only 40 years young.
Yeah.
You go to other places like Italy or Germany or France, they're thousands of years, and it's a culture, and that's what I mean. I'm a part of the beginning of this cultural change, and that's the fun part.
Are you afraid that there might be too much disruption in this?
I think that it is a fragile area. There are people that want to be here for different reasons. It is an agricultural community, always has been an agricultural community, and so vineyards protect that.
Yeah.
They keep that alive. They keep families farming it. It gets back to can we find the balance between the community and the people that want the change, meaning the cultural changes that are taking place with the wine and people coming to visit the area. The big impact is there enough housing for people? Is there enough of a destination for people to come and stay and enjoy? If you don't have that destination part where they can stay and enjoy, then what is it? It's a day trip.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard to create that culture.
Right. But yeah, you're doing that so well. Like I said, this is amazing accommodations that you have here.
Well, we want to preserve the future. The house is 1854, and so it was either a knockdown and then lose that history, or keep the history and make it a place where people can have the amenities that they look for today, with having the ability to sit outside and relax and enjoy themselves. And I think that's the hard part for us, is that to get people to unwind a little bit. And so that's why we've designed the place the way we're designing it, so they can come here and enjoy themselves rather than feel that pressure and anxieties of the daily things that go on.
Yeah. What's coming up for Jamesport this summer?
The big thing is the kitchen going in.
Yeah.
We've been working on that for quite a long time in terms of the process of getting it done properly. But people are excited the fact that it's going to be permanent. It's going to be nighttime also, which is something different for us. We normally shut down at the end of the day, and the winery goes to sleep, and then we get up in the morning and start it all over.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be adding a different dynamic where people are going to be able to come here at nighttime. They are going to be able to be on the property, enjoying themselves in a winery setting, and that's really what you're trying to do, is marriage that lifestyle change that's going on out here, because not everybody can be here during the day, and so you want to be able to have that feeling of people coming to a place and enjoying great wine and getting great food at the same time.
That's awesome. And so if people, and you also do a wine club, right? So you do,
yes.
you do deliver,
We do direct delivery. It goes out once a month. It's 2-bottle minimum, 6-month commitment. And that's a great way for people who can't get here all the time to have that shipped directly to them. It's a big part of the business, in the sense that it's another avenue for people to still be a part of Jamesport.
Right.
And now with the food going in, we're going to be adding a wine and food package setup, so that people who can come here or can get here once a year or twice a year, they're able to take advantage of the fact that we have this set up on the property this way.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you one more thing. So you're big on sustainability, because of, like you said, you studied agriculture and stuff. Can you just speak a little bit to that and why it's important?
Sustainability is a funny word. People think a lot of different things about sustainability, but it means one thing: profitability. If you're not sustainable, you're not profitable. If you're not profitable, you're not sustainable.
That's
and
true.
And that's the hard part. Sustainable is obviously the environment, it's the impact, and there's that side of it. And there's a movement today around the world, obviously, for less impact on the groundwaters and the earth and things of that nature. And I know from a farming standpoint, I don't want to have to put anything out there, because number one, it costs money, and number two, it potentially does affect the quality long term of the soil that we're working with. And there's been a lot of studies on that long-time use of certain things creates problems, and it's like us taking aspirins all the time, and the pain doesn't go away. It keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and keep popping more and more aspirins. Right?
Yeah.
So IPM, Integrated Pest Management, is a program that's available throughout the United States. And so what that is, it's a way to look at the farm, figure out what it is, whether it's disease, insects, or weed species, and how to balance that, and what is it that you're really trying to accomplish. And less impact means better quality in the long run, in terms of the quality of the wine, because you're putting less things into it.
Yeah.
Because you want to allow the fruit to express itself. And so the more stuff you mix and play with, the more you take away from what the fruit was really supposed to taste like.
Right.
And so we learned early on that we want to let the land rest. We want to allow the land to have proper nutrients. We do crop rotations. We scout the vineyards looking for problems, and we try to use the least amount of pesticides as possible, because once again, it's an expense, and it's something that we really don't want to put on the fruit if we don't have to. We do live in a maritime climate, so that's always the challenge, is the humidity. And the humidity is our biggest foe, in the sense that it creates disease pressure. And so the vines are very susceptible to powdery mildew or downy mildew. And so in a perfect world, we don't have to do anything. That would be the perfect world. But that's, it's, every region faces some kind of thing that they've got to deal with. We don't have dry humidity here. California has a lot of that, and so they have very little impacts. They have to get away with very few sprays in terms of what they're trying to do. The good news for us is that there is a sustainable movement here. There's about 25 vineyards, a part of that. And once again, we meet on an annual basis to try and discuss things of how we can figure out better ways to manage the fruit that we're dealing with. Because obviously it's the consumer who ultimately is impacted by all this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me and for inviting me here. This is amazing. It's great to experience something like this on the North Fork and be a part of the culture that you're trying to create.